During this postnatal period, the bones are also going to increase in width. And that is called appositional bone growth. So the key again here to remember, like on the last slide, is when you hear interstitial, that's increase in length. And appositional is an increase in thickness or diameter. And both of these terms are used for postnatal bone growth. So the growing bones are going to widen as they lengthen through appositional growth. It can occur all throughout the lifetime. Bones are going to thicken in response to increased stress from muscle activity or added weight. So those bone markings that were mentioned in a previous video, those are actually going to increase in areas where those muscles are attached and there's more stress put on the skeleton. So the osteoblasts are going to secrete bone matrix. Osteoclasts remove that bone by endosteal surface. So it's sort of like we have these two cells working in tandem. The osteoblasts are going to deposit calcium matrix, and the osteoclasts are going to remove it through calcium resorption. So there's usually more building up than breaking, which leads to thicker, stronger bone that is not too heavy. So again, we see resorption and destruction versus osteoclast activity or osteoblast activity. So the osteoclast is again resorption, osteoblast is bone deposition. In the image to the right here, we can see that as the bone grows in length, remodeling, resorption, and deposition maintain the bone's shape. So it's kind of like this is an outline of the bone before growth and remodeling. And this is bone that was here and has been resorbed. And articular and epiphyseal plate cartilage grows and is replaced by bone, again, which is endochondral ossification. The next stage of bone ossification throughout life is the bone remodeling process. And that's controlled by hormones as well as pressures that are put on the bone. So, one of the most important hormones is the growth hormone, stimulating epiphyseal plate activity in infancy and childhood. The thyroid hormone can actually modulate the growth hormone, ensuring proper propositions or proportions, not propositions. And instrumental hormones in this, as you could probably guess, are the sex hormones. So we have testosterone in males, estrogens in females. At puberty, this promotes adolescent growth spurts and can end growth by inducing epiphyseal plate closures. So again, 18 in females, thereabout. Doesn't always have to be 18. And then 21 in males also. Doesn't, again, have to be exactly 21. But any excesses or deficits can cause abnormal skeletal growth. So when we consider bone remodeling, I want you to uh, remember that about 5 to 7% of bone mass is recycled each week, which is pretty amazing. So after every several years, a bone is going to be replaced. Spongy bone is replaced faster every 3 to 4 years, and compact bone can take up to 10 years. So the bone remodeling process occurs because of the rate of bony deposition, which is by osteoblasts, and bone resorption, which is from osteoclast. So these two cells are going to work at the surfaces of the periosteum and endosteum. So the analogy that I want you to think of is if we think of bone as a calcium bank, whenever the bone decreases or the calcium in the blood decreases, it's going to come out of the calcium bank. So let's imagine that the stimulus here is going to be a decrease in calcium in the blood, and the response is going to be the opposite. The way this happens is the endocrine system. There's a hormone called parathyroid hormone that's going to make a calcium withdrawal. So instead of a calcium withdrawal, I want you to think of a calcium withdrawal. So it takes the calcium out of the bone, puts it into the blood, and if that's not enough calcium, it can also take calcium from the blood itself through the kidneys or from the digestive system from nutrients that are in it. So let's look at bone resorption and deposit. And again, this basically is a real summary of what's going to occur here. So resorption is the function of osteoclast. It converts the calcium salts into soluble forms so that it can go into the blood. If it was still in a calcium salt form, it could not be in the blood. So we're going to say so that it can go into the blood. The osteoclasts, on the other hand, or osteoblasts rather, we're not quite to that. Osteoclasts also phagocytize demineralized matrix, and this involves the parathyroid hormone that I just talked about on the previous slide. So again, for calcium activation, I want you to think calcium withdrawal. And when you think of the opposite cells, the osteoblasts, I want you to think of calcium deposit, which would be the opposite of what we just saw here. So if we were to go from high calcium and bring it back down, there would be another hormone. Usually it's a decrease in PTH. There are certain situations where the hormone calcitonin can play a role, but it's osteoblast activity, which would be a calcium deposit. So again, when you see calcium withdrawal, you need to think osteoclast. And when you see calcium deposit, you need to think osteoblast. So the triggers for this deposit may include mechanical signals, which basically is us putting pressure on our bones through exercise.